And by the way, we have a fully functional YouTube channel that connects to our website at reportsforthepresident.com, as well as our main site, gtmaga.com, and more information will be coming out as we progress. But our first report, which is a breaking new one, which we just posted yesterday, last night, maybe this morning, depends on how you look at it, is live at reportforthepresident.com. The first report is no collusion. And not only is it no collusion, I'm going to introduce Bill and let Bill speak about it. It's not just no collusion. He's going to get a little in-depth about that. But as I wanted to share a little bit from my perspective as a U.S. Navy veteran, the intelligence that Bill and many of his timely men working together in agencies provided us while we were out to sea was what gave us the opportunity to take down those bad guys that we were fighting against in the Persian Gulf War, and Operation equivalency of Operation Enduring Freedom, as well as narco-terrorism events that I was a part of in other South America and other areas to combat and get these bad actors out of the way. So it is very important that people understand that we are not talking about all of intelligence as being a negative here, but we're going to talk about how important it is that we have our Fourth Amendment protected. So Bill, why don't you take it away here about no collusion and your thoughts on it, and also maybe about a little bit about what you've been up to this past week as well.
Sure. Well, first of all, when it came to looking at some of the material, like, for example, in the Rosenstein indictment, talks about two things, DC leaks and Guccifer II as the foundation of evidence to go at and say there was voting and election meddling by the Russians in our election in 2016. And the point with that was that when Guccifer II put data out there, we techies now had something to analyze. And when we started looking at it, he was claiming that it was a hack from Russia,
right?
DNC. He did two hacks. One he listed as the 5th of July, and the other the 1st of September of 2016. So when we were looking at this, we were looking at all kinds of things. It was the data. He would give the amount of data per file, then a timestamp, the next file amount of data, timestamp, and so on. So between two timestamps, you could calculate the time difference and also see the speed of transfer of data.
Mm-hmm.
So when we did that, we found that the highest rate of transfer of data from that whole set of data that Guccifer II put out there was 49.1 megabytes per second.
Yeah.
We knew that could not go across the net. He said it couldn't. And others who challenged that said, oh, yeah, we think it can. Well, so we said, okay, let's try it. So I had some hacker friends in Europe, and I had some friends over here in the U.S. who put a data set, a gigabyte out there and said, okay, play with it, pull it across as fast as you can, any way you can, from wherever you can. So we tried it from, Serbia, from Albania, from Netherlands, and from the UK, just to see how quickly we could get it across. And the fastest we got was between two data centers with something like a 1.5 gigabit line between them. We could get across it. We could get it across there as the fastest was 12 megabytes per second, less than a fourth the necessary speed to transfer just the data. That didn't count the housekeeping that goes on top of it. So it was clearly we could not. We actually showed that you couldn't take it down at that rate. So it wasn't a hack to begin with. But then when we looked at it a little closer, we found that the time gaps in the 5 July data were plugged by the data from 1 September. They filled the gaps between data clusters in the 5 July data if you ignored the hour and the date, which we did. And so then you could just merge the two into one data set. So that told us that Guccifer II, not only was he lying about it being a hack, but he was also playing with the data. He took one download of data. Incidentally, the speed for the download is compatible with any kind of thumb drive. All the thumb drives you use currently, it will go down on the thumb drive at that rate. As long as you plug it into the computer, it'll go right down. So it was a local download, wherever local is. We couldn't prove where local does. Yeah. So, but it didn't matter. It wasn't a hack. That's the point.
That's the point.
But it also showed that he played with the data. He's fabricating the demonstration of the data. So the whole thing is a fabrication. So
Fabrication.
Fake set of information. It was created to go back at the administration and the president.
So it's total falsity. It's a fabrication.
Absolutely. It's a lie from the beginning.
It's not just that there's no collusion. It's a lie and a fabrication. It's built on what? What is it built on?
Well, it's built on, false information being manipulated. We call that manipulation, or in the Russian term, manipulatia.
Manipulatia. Who else did manipulatia? Who else did that? Who do we know in history that manipulated data for their own political gains?
Well, the UK has been doing that for a long time, back to World War I,
Sure.
World War II, we did it. We created a whole army around Patton in England after he was slapped that fellow. And they put him in the corner over there because they knew the Germans were looking at him. So
we've used that in a theater of war time frame, and now it's being used against what? The American people?
Yes, it's to convince them that there's something wrong here, that we should impeach President Bush or Trump.
President Trump, right? We
should have impeached President Bush, but we didn't.
That's a little Freudian slip there, right?
Yeah.
So, Bill, we're going to be, I was just on your Voice America, and Vandersteel on Still Truth is doing a great job, really pulling apart and investigating into this with us. And maybe you could just share a little bit. You met with her, right, in D.C.?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I met with her in D.C., and we're going to do a show on Monday. She's going to record the show around noontime. When she's broadcasted, I'm not sure, but we're going to be talking about a lot of this material, a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, they have a show on Mondays at 8 p.m. That's going to be the Steel Truth show, and we at JTF MAGA have come together for this platform for a specific purpose, and that purpose is for us to bring the truth out and to get this report to the president as well as to the public, because you and I both are just appalled at what we have seen, what we have heard, and what we've been a part of, right?
And when the president was saying he was wiretapped, I mean, he used the wrong word. It wasn't a wiretap. Okay.
No, we know that.
The constant monitor. I mean, he was monitored for years.
Yes.
Not just during the election, but even well before that. I mean, the point is that NSA has so many. This is one of the main things we want to talk about is the Fairview program, AT&T, which is the main tapping point inside the U.S. They have like 100 tapping points distributed right across the country with the population. The more population, the more numbers of taps. So, and that's the use to feed the databases for NSA. And they put NARIS devices. I've shared with you the NARIS capability, which simply says with the Insight device, I mean, it handles a 10 gigabit line. Everything passed on the line, it will sessionize everything.
And for those who aren't that technical, it's just a huge pipe of information. It's everything. Right.
That's right.
And everything that we hear, everything that we are talking about on the phone, every WhatsApp, every Telegram, every Signal, every connection, they have access, and you share this with me, is that they are the user accessing that device, right?
Yep. And the companies are helping them tap the lines.
Yep. Because if they don't, they cross the wrong person, they might get something bad.
That's why they had to give them retroactive immunity for not knowing what the immunity was for.
Yeah.
For allowing the taps on the lines and giving them all the data about their customers. That's what it was for.
So they were doing a CYA there, right?
Yeah. Well, they had to protect them because the law says for every violation of the privacy rights of your customers, or in this case, the violation of their constitutional rights, the fine is like $5,000 per occurrence and up to 5 years in jail. Well, when you do several billion occurrences every day, my estimate was 3 billion a day. Okay, by them. A day, right? That's right. Per day.
You say they. Who are you talking about? Who's they?
It's up to 30 telecommunications companies and ISPs and the NSA.
And the NSA.
Yeah. Well, they're taking in all the, for example, the power of one NARIS Insight device, if you could unique all of the emails in the world, it could handle all of them with one device.
One. And there's how many?
Hundreds probably. I mean, they have hundreds of taps around the world, and these are on major fiber lines where the junctions are major fibers converging, and that's where they put them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So, and when you say this could be a fine and up to 5 years, what is that? Why is that great? Why is there a fine? What is it that they're in violation?
Well, because they're violating the Electronic Privacy Act, Electronic Security Act, the Pen Register Law, the First, Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments, the Constitution, all of those things, plus a few other laws covering FCC regulations governing the telecommunications companies and how they're supposed to protect their customers' data, right? That's why that. And so for the first day, they would be bankrupt.
All of them?
Less than the first day, yeah.
Less than the first day.
Well, multiply it out, by the billions,
By whom? If they were really held to the letter of the law, by whom would they be held in account with?
By a class action lawsuit by U.S. citizens.
So that's a jaw dropper right there. That's where we have to go.
Well, that's where I'm trying to go. Yeah.
So let's go. So let's share that.
Yeah.
So now, Bill, you and I are a part of this team. There's over 100 that have come together into JTF MAGA, like yourself, have a platform and a specificity of understanding here. So you brought your information to the table, and you have an affidavit. You want to share about that? You said where you're trying to go. You want to get into that a little bit?
A couple of affidavits. The one main one that I was submitted after the Edward Snowden material came out was in the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, and it's a lawsuit against the United States government for violating constitutional rights of U.S. citizens, all of us. Roughly right? 280 million of us, okay?
Right.
There's a few million that aren't on the line. They don't use, like, kids younger than, 3 don't normally use the phone, and things like that.
They're digital natives. My kids have phones, but, that's not working.
That's right. And at the other end, you get people who are in homes and things like that aren't active on the net, So there's those exceptions. So you're talking maybe about 280 million.
Most people have a device in their hands.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Right. These things being recorded all the time. We know that they're listening in on us. So where we stand right now, we have the opportunity to share this information. But moreover, when you talked about, just to dial it back a second, you talked about the president being recorded and hadn't been tapped for a long time. But what we found out, and what I was a part of, which they've now dubbed Spygate, was of Obama's era Stasi-style manipulation of planting, actually having moles inside the campaign. And so as they're watching and listening to everybody in the campaign, they also were taking that information and giving it to people abroad and sharing that within a candidate Trump, not just a potential, the candidate Trump.
See, that's another problem. A lot of the databases at NSA are shared with other countries. For example, IC Reach is a collective accessed by Five Eyes, the Five Eyes countries, as well as CIA, DEA, and other agencies within the U.S. government. They all share this database, and there's a whole scheme set up to incorporate that. It's called IC Reach. It's on the web. And some of the material and Snowden had released showed the connection and the countries involved. But also there's another one called XP Score. That's the program that allows them to interrogate the database from other countries, like about 8 or 9 other countries, including things like Japan and Poland, and they can access certain portions of that database. I'm sure they're partitioned, so they're limited on what they can access, but they still have that capacity to access data stored in NSA storage facilities.
Wow. So what you're alluding to is that other bad actors could have access to this information, right?
Not counting the contractors. I mean, from all these companies, and some of those have, shaky relationships, like for example, loyalties to other countries and loyalties to, other divisions in those same companies who might be, wanting, industrial espionage to help them win contracts and things like that.
Sure.
All that data is available for them to do it.
So not only are we talking about our liberties being, but you're also talking about from a corporate espionage standpoint, where they're looking out for their own vested interest in their own money schemes or whatever plans that they have that are nefarious, and they could utilize that information for their own gains, right? Plus,
they're using it. The FBI and the DEA are using it for common crime inside the United States. And they've been doing it. Mueller is a part of this. He's been a part of it since 2001. He basically admitted to it in a Bart Gellman interview in Time magazine in 2011.
With it.
Yeah, and he'd been using the NSA collection, domestic collection on U.S. citizens against. That's why I said they were violating the Fifth Amendment and the Sixth, because when the Fifth Amendment, that means you don't have to testify against. They're acquiring this without a warrant. Therefore, they're using it as testimony by you against you, and so it's a violation of the Fifth Amendment. But also, then they do what's called, since they can't use NSA data in a court of law when they go to prosecute people, they do what's called a parallel construction. That means this is for common crime inside the U.S. as well as other countries. It's shared with other countries too. So they have to do a parallel construction, which means they use standard policing techniques, go out and find equivalent information. It helps when you know where it is to begin with. So
yeah, you already seen it. Yeah,
it really look good, you know.
Yeah, it's not too hard. X marks the spot, right?
Yeah, but they go out and find it and then bring it in and say, okay, this is now the evidence that they introduce in the court of law to say this is what we used to arrest them. So it's a substitution of data, violating the Sixth Amendment due process rights of the individual involved in the case, the defendant, because he has the right to challenge discovery of any data in a court of law used against him in a court of law. This is denying him that right. It's called perjury, right? So they're committing perjury to do this. And in fact, in the case Amnesty International versus Clapper, which Chris Hedges was a complainant in, the Solicitor General lied to the Supreme Court to get that case thrown out. He said in that case, that if this data, NSA data, was ever used against a defendant in a court of law, everybody would be told, the judge, the lawyers, and the defendant and all, so they could challenge this. That was an outright lie. No one has ever been told. And so, if I were on the Supreme Court, I would have reinstated that case with prejudice against the government and also held the government in contempt of the Supreme Court.
Well, maybe that still needs to happen, Bill. And with our conversation, we can keep traveling these things, right?
However, you have to understand the NSA is also spying on the Supreme Court, members of the Supreme Court.
Because everything is open to them, not only them, but others.
Right.
Wow.
In fact, we had another whistleblower from NSA, Russ Tice, who brought that issue up in 2003. And they labeled him as mentally insane or mentally impaired, one form or another. It was just like KGB tactics, okay? That's what they did over there. Except over there, they would physically force them into a mental institution. We have not done that here yet.
Not yet. That's what we're fighting against.
Not yet. No.
Not yet. So we're not going to let
But in order to discredit him, they would say he's mentally, then they had him go see a psychiatrist at NSA. They forced this on him, and then they say, he's mentally insane, or mentally impaired. But that's why they kill people, whistleblowers.
Well, I appreciate your courage. I got to say here, I don't say that I haven't been able to tell you face to face, but I appreciate your courage. I appreciate all that you've been doing. You've definitely stepped out there, put yourself out in the limelight. You've stepped out in the light when so many people are hiding in the darkness. You definitely epitomized what it is to be a hero in this environment, and are continuing to wear the white hat to clarify what these issues are. And I know that you are an oath keeper. You may not carry it like the West Pointers do, but as an Army veteran, I'm encouraged to see that another veteran, we're talking about this, and that veterans are standing up because just like you, I raised my hand as an oath keeper to defend this Constitution against both foreign and domestic enemies. And there are domestic enemies running amok in our country. And as you just pointed out, a lot of bad actors have access to information that they should not have because of this nefarious activity. So that's why we're here, right, Bill?
That's right.
That's why we've come together with JTF MAGA. We're here to not let this continue, and we don't want to see this happen anymore, right?
I would say, I would point out, the only thing that's made this country special is our Constitution.
Hallelujah.
That's the only thing. It's the only country with a Constitution based on human rights.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There is no other document in this country that stipulates that is a necessity for its citizens, that is what we are built upon. And every citizen out here of America has that right. And I concur with you 100%, my friend. And that's why we're here. We're defending for our children, our children's children, right?
Right.
Ultimately, legacy. So, Bill, I just want to close it up and just give it a teaser out there. I know we could sit here and talk for hours, but our community wants to hear a little bit from us when we can. So maybe we'll keep these things going. Always love talking to you. Thanks for your time, Bill. And we're going to see you on with Ann Steele Truth here next week. Okay.
That's right. See you then. Thanks, John.
All right, thanks.